Hello, my name is Emma, and today I'm going to be showing you all of the books that I bought in 2020.
Please do not tell me that my only take for the very first line of this video says 2020 instead of 2022.
Yes, I have been out of the booktube game for quite a while, but I've recently gotten some new inspiration to be working on some older videos that I'm hoping to get out to you soon, but I wanted to film a sit-down video, get back to my roots, and show you all of the books that I have not shared that I've obtained recently. First up, I have 9 Liars, which is the newest installment, the 5th book in the Truly Devious series, and it was sent to me by Epic Reads. I have been talking about the Truly Devious series since it first came out. It has really become one of my favorite YA series, one of my favorite YA mysteries, and I'm so excited that this series is getting so many more books than the original trilogy. 9 Liars picks up after The Box in the Woods, which is the first book outside of the original Truly Devious series, so it's a continuation and it follows our main characters throughout their senior year of Ellingham Academy. Stevie, Janelle, Vi, and Nate all go to London to visit Stevie's boyfriend under the pretense of a little study abroad for about a week or so, but because it is Truly Devious, Stevie uncovers a cold case from the 90s and is intent on solving it. 9 Liars is the first and only book I have finished so far in 2023, and I absolutely loved it. I feel like I can't really tell if it's my favorite of the series because I started reading them so long ago, but it really does stand out to me. I typically am not a fan of like dual timeline stories and flashbacks, which every Truly Devious book has them, but I was significantly more engaged in the story of this one. It is about this really large group of friends where 2 of them end up murdered after a night of playing hide and seek, and I just really could not stop reading this book. It was so engaging. I just absolutely love this book. I really couldn't put it down, and that's a new feeling for me as of late because I just haven't been as motivated to read, but I really think it's gonna stay as one of my top favorites of the year because it was so good, and if you haven't read Truly Devious yet, please check it out. Next up, I have The First to Die at the End, which is the prequel to They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. So this book takes place the night that Deathcast, if you're familiar with the book, is launched into the world, and it follows the very first person to ever get a call from Deathcast. I read The First to Die at the End when it came out last year, and I did really enjoy it. I think that I prefer They Both Die at the End because I just feel like The First to Die at the End didn't have as much complexity as the other book, but it does deal with some very different themes, which I enjoyed being explored. An interesting difference I noticed is that in They Both Die at the End, there are significantly more points of views of like people who are kind of on the outskirts of the protagonist story, whereas in this book it mostly focuses on the 2 main characters and the originator and creator of Deathcast, which was very interesting to read. I think I just didn't feel as attached to these main characters as I did with Mateo and Rufus, but there are a lot of cool callbacks to the original story when this takes place in the past, so it's like an interesting juxtaposition, but it was still a really enjoyable read and another one that I couldn't put down. Then I have Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this is the UK version that I ordered through Blackwell's, and you know me, I love collecting different editions of my favorite books, and I just cannot get over how much I adore the colors of this cover. I'm sure y'all have heard me talk about Malibu Rising before. This is another book similar to The First to Die at the End that takes place over the span of one day, and it follows these 4 siblings as they are preparing for their annual end of summer party, and by the end of the night the house has gone up in flames. So it's all about understanding the dynamics and different struggles that the main characters are going through, some really interesting family dynamics if that's something that you like to read about, and it was just all around really fun. It takes on a different tone than the other Taylor Jenkins Reid's books because this one is the one of her more recent works that takes place over the course of one day, so I don't feel like it has the same emotional impact for me as Daisy Jones and the Six and The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but I absolutely loved this story. It says on the cover the perfect beach read, and it absolutely is. Like, it just gives me good summer vibes, and I just really loved reading about the interactions and history between these very different siblings as well as their history with their father and mother, because this is another book that goes back into the timeline and the story of how their parents met and all of the different tribulations that they went through. So I love a good family-oriented story, and Malibu Rising really just hits all of those points for me. Next I have All of Us Villains by Amanda Foody and Christine Lynn Herman. This is another book that I read last year, so I feel like I'm starting off with a lot of books that I have something to talk about. This story is kind of like a fantasy Hunger Games versus a dystopian. It follows another tournament where the main magical families in this country called Ilvernath, every generation they have a competition to the death where the children are vying for their family to be able to control the source of magic in this world. I liked this book. It was very enjoyable, but I would by no means say that it is a favorite of mine. It was entertaining, but I feel like my enjoyment of the book kind of tapered off towards the end. There's like 5 to 7 main characters whose perspectives you are following, and I feel like a lot of times in fantasy books it just becomes like too many cooks in the kitchen. The magic system of this world is very interesting. I feel like because I read this book so long ago, I can't really detail the surrounding of it, but it did feel very unique to a lot of the magic systems I've read about in fantasies. It's just really intricate and well explained, so it's complex but easy to follow, so that was a real high point of the book for me. I do feel like this book was kind of just like too long, especially in the beginning. There is so much exposition, so much of the book takes place before the competition even starts, and so I was like, okay, like, let's get to the meat of this. I just wasn't as engaged in the process of choosing the champions and what it was like for them leading up to the tournament. It felt a little unfinished at the end for me. I feel like they really could have cut out a lot of the beginning to make the ending more complete. I definitely would read the sequel though. Like, it engaged me and I was interested enough to continue with the series. I don't know if it's supposed to be a duology or a trilogy, but I am interested in reading the last book. But it was a fun fantasy read, and I feel like we just need those every once in a while. Not every book has to be groundbreaking and amazing and your favorite of all time, you know? Then I have I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. This is Casey's first foray into the YA world, and as somebody who really loved both of their adult fiction contemporary romances, I was super excited to see what comes of their take on YA. This story follows a girl named Chloe who is coming to the end of high school, getting ready to graduate, but a month before the school year ends, she is kissed by a classmate named Shara Wheeler, and then Shara disappears. Like I said, 2022, not my best reading year. I got super comfortable with DNFing books, which I think was really necessary for me, and I read like the first 2 pages of I Kissed Shara Wheeler. I was not at all engaged, so I put it down and haven't picked it up since, but it is a book that I would like to return to. Next up, it would not be an Emma Books video if I didn't have some new Cassie Clare books to share with you, so I got the 5th anniversary edition of the Dark Artificers series by Cassandra Clare. This is from Fairy Loot, and I'd really like to pretend like I didn't just say this was the 5th anniversary, because there is no way that Lady Midnight came out 5 years ago. I feel like my life just stopped at 2017 and has not progressed forward since. But this is a really cool book set. It has these sprayed edges that match all of the different colors of the books, and they all have different runes on the spines, or the middle spines. What is this called? Anyways, it also comes with really cool images and illustrations on the front and back pages. They're also different for each of the books as well, and that's something that I really value when obtaining multiple copies of books. Like, I don't want just the cover, I want something else included in it. You know me, I just always want to collect every single Cassie Clare book that I possibly can, and so these will go really nicely on my entire bookcase worth of Cassie Clare books at this point. Then I have a really tiny little book called Congratulations, by the Way by George Saunders, and this is the transcript of a speech that George Saunders gave at a Syracuse University graduation, which went super viral. This was actually sent to me by my grad program. When I first started the program at orientation, one of our activities was we all had to write letters to our future selves, and our grad program would mail them to us after graduation. And so with the letter that I received that I wrote to myself 3 years prior, they sent this book and like a couple of other knickknacks, and I just thought it was a really thoughtful gift. Another book that I got this year is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, and I'm sure everyone watching this video has heard of this book because it totally took the world by storm when it first came out. This is the memoir from Jeanette McCurdy, who many people mostly know from playing Sam on iCarly, and this is An absolutely amazing memoir. It is definitely one of my favorite books that I read last year, and I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by Jeanette, and that's something I always love when reading memoirs or nonfiction books. This is such a profound memoir. I love this book so much, and I think that so many people need to read it because the main theme of the overall story is about Jeanette coming to terms with the fact that while she always thought that her mother was her best friend who did everything for her, she later on realized that she spent most of her life suffering emotional abuse at the hands of her mother. I think everyone didn't know this until Jeanette started talking about it after ending her acting career, but she was never interested in acting. It was forced upon her by her mother, so it really tells the story of her dealing with being forced into being a child actress, how she developed an eating disorder, substance abuse issues, and grappling with the fact that her mother was dealing with cancer and eventually died throughout all of this. I think this can particularly be a really important story for helping people uncover the fact that they might have also suffered abuse and trauma that they didn't recognize when they were younger, and I feel like this is just a book that is going to touch so many people. If you're okay reading books on those topics, I really recommend you check it out. Another book I bought in 2022 was Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan, and this is a book that was super hyped when I first joined BookTube in 2014. It was like everyone had read it, everyone was raving about it, and for some reason I just like never got to it over the years. But one day I was getting my nails done, and I always listen to an audiobook when I'm getting my nails done, but my AirPods had died and I was like, I don't want to just like sit here listening to the radio. So I found it on an ebook, and then I was just periodically reading the ebook over time, and I absolutely adored this book. It's another one of my favorites that I read last year. If you haven't heard of this book, it follows our main character named Clea, who ends up getting a job at a 24-hour bookstore, and he is working the night shift. It is clearly a very interesting bookstore, not just because it is open 24 hours, but in the evening time during Clea's shift, he discovers that people are actually like renting and exchanging books, not so much buying them, and the story really becomes this kind of scavenger hunt of figuring out like, what are these books? What is this bookstore? Why are these people getting these books? What is the purpose behind it all? And it was really exhilarating. The plot of the story just goes way beyond what you can expect from the very beginning, and I believe there is a prequel written for this, but I feel like I'm just not as interested in it now that I know everything that has happened, but it might be a prequel that I return to in the future. I'm just really happy that I finally picked this book up this year because now I really understand all of that hype. The next book I picked up last year is Heartstopper Volume 4 by Alice Oseman, and I completely forgot until coming to film this book haul that I actually reread all of the first 3 Heartstopper books this year, so I need to add that to my 2022 reads list. But I also read the 4th volume. Naturally, when the Heartstopper TV show came out, I became obsessed with the story again. I really loved what they did with the TV adaptation of the story. I think it added a lot of nuance and complexity because that was one of my original complaints with the story. It just felt so simple. So I reread all of the first 3 installments, and then I picked up and read the 4th one, and I really enjoyed the 4th book of this story because I'm like, finally we're getting some real conflict. So Heartstopper Volume 4 really follows Charlie and Nick as they are growing in their relationship. They're starting to feel like they might want to say I love you to each other, and Nick is dealing with wanting to come out to his dad while also grappling with the fact that he thinks that Charlie might have an eating disorder. Particularly one of the themes that I loved most in this book because we just do not get enough representation of men and boys with eating disorders, but I was really happy with the way that it was handled in this book, and especially the difficulty that comes with being the sole source of support of somebody that's struggling with mental health issues, especially as a teenager. I've been in that position so many times, and it really is isolating and leaves you feeling helpless, and I just felt like all of his emotions were captured in this story so well. I just really loved the 4th installment of Heartstopper. I think it might be my favorite. The 4th one really holds up and adds a lot more like maturity to the story, so if you haven't picked up Heartstopper yet, definitely like this is your time. The next book was also sent to me by HarperCollins/Epic Reads, and I do just want to make a note here because there are a couple of Harper books that I've been talking about. If you aren't aware, there are a number of workers from the HarperCollins Union that are currently on strike. We are approaching day like 45 or 50 at this point of them being on strike, demanding fair, livable wages for employees, as well as more diversity within the company. So I don't want to just not talk about Harper books. That would be disingenuous for me because I love a lot of their books, and also I don't want to punish the authors who deserve to have their books talked about, but I do just want to make a note of it that I'm very much in support of these strikers, and I do want them to have all of the reasonable things they are asking for. So if you're interested in learning more or supporting them, I've left some links and resources to that in the description. But the next book I was sent by them is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. I don't know if this is YA or adult because usually her adult books are the ones written under V.E. Schwab, but it feels a little bit more YA just from the synopsis. Maybe somebody can clarify for me. And I feel like I also just like don't have the greatest idea about what Gallant is about, but it follows a girl named Olivia who has been going through her mother's old journal entries, and she's starting to piece together clues about what might have gone on in her mother's past when she receives a letter that is calling her back to her home named Gallant, where her mother's journal always instructs her never to go. It sounds very intriguing, so I think it is a fantasy book that I would be interested in picking up. I'm just like, I'm super picky about fantasy lately. It's like, I just haven't found a like new fantasy book that I've been interested in, and I've been sticking to fantasies written by authors I already love. If you have read Gallant though, I'd love to hear your thoughts because I just feel like I haven't heard as many things about this book as some of the other ones I'm talking about, so I'm really curious to know what people think of this one. Next up, I have Margaret and the Mystery of the Missing Body by Megan Milks. Oh my god, the alliteration. So this book, I don't actually know what it's about. I have to reread the synopsis, but I had gone to this like bookstore slash bar in New York City. I don't remember the name. I want to say it was maybe literally just called Book Bar or like library bar, something having to do with books and drinks. And Kaylee, my friend who you may know, had come across this book, and she goes over to me and she was like, I feel like this is a book that is really your type. And when I read about it, I was like, oh my gosh, this so is my type. Oh, this is so clearly my book. This book was written for me. This book has all of the themes that make up the perfect book for me. So now I am feeling much more like I should really pick this one up soon. It follows a girl who, as a like preteen, her and her friends were investigators. They solved mysteries and crimes, and it was a good time for them, but as they enter high school, she is really struggling with the idea of growing up and her friends growing up as well, and within that process she develops an eating disorder and finds herself in a treatment center where she uncovers a new mystery with ghosts and a hidden passage, and it sounds so written for me. It apparently is a queer novel, a trans novel, a coming of age story, so I've been in this space where I don't know what to physically pick up after 9 Liars, so this sounds like it would be a really good choice for me. The next book I picked up was at a thrift store because it was a super great deal, but it is Van Gogh, a retrospective. So I got this at a thrift store because it was only $5, and I was like, oh my god, what a steal. But Van Gogh is one of my favorite artists. I've always been a fan of him, so I don't really know what this book is about. I'm assuming that it is just talking a lot about his life, his history, his paintings, of course, and Van Gogh's story, not just as an artist, but his life is something I've been interested in for a very long time, and I just figured this would be like the perfect coffee table book for when Jake and I move in together very soon. So I'm excited. I haven't really flipped through it much, but it's something that I feel like one day I will just like sit down and read some passages and flip through it. So in 2022, I traveled to Atlanta for the first time to go to the American Counseling Association conference, and it was a really amazing experience. So I picked up quite a few books that I was there, some nonfiction as well as some counseling therapy oriented books. First I have Transcending Trauma, Healing Complex PTSD with Internal Family Systems Therapy, and this is a book I am really excited to dive into because I have been dealing with more trauma work as a counselor. It's something that I am trying to increase my knowledge about and would like to get more certifications on in the future. But complex PTSD is something that is so prevalent in the field, and it is something that does not get as much research as what we have typically considered PTSD in the past, as well as I am super interested in internal family systems therapy. It is a particular approach to therapy that also is not like focused on as much in graduate programs, but I like to take some parts of it that I do feel confident in working with my clients, but I really want to be more proficient in it. So I feel like this book just takes all of the things I am trying to gear my counselor identity towards into one book, so I want to read it very soon. Oh, interesting, my next book is actually written by the person who did the foreword in the Transcending Trauma book, but my next book is No Bad Parts: Healing, Trauma, and Restoring Wholeness in the Internal Family Systems Model by Richard C. Schwartz, foreword by Alanis Morissette, which I think is pretty cool, but it's very much in the same vein as the book that I just talked about. Something I come across a lot is judgment of different parts of ourselves, whether it is the anxious part of ourselves, the addicted part of ourselves, the traumatized part of ourselves, and I was really captured by the title of this book and the idea that like there are no bad parts, or maybe parts of us that cause additional struggles or grief for us, but they are all inherently good and serve a purpose. So this is another one I'm super excited to get to. My next book that I got is also by Richard C. Schwartz, which I did not realize that I had so many of his books, but it's called You Are the One You've Been Waiting For: Bringing Courageous Love to Intimate Relationships. And I know that this was recommended to me by, I think, my supervisor, but it doesn't have a synopsis and I really don't know what it's about, but given Richard C. Schwartz's history in internal systems family therapy models, I'm pretty sure that that's why I picked this one up. So another one to get to. And the final counseling related book that I have is Attached: The New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love by Amir Levine and Rachel S.F. Heller. So this is a highly revered book in the therapy community. It is all about understanding attachment styles, which if you are unfamiliar, it is all about how the attachment we have to our caregivers and loved ones early in life is what causes our attachment style later in life. So there's a variety of different ones, like secure, avoidant dismissive, disorganized. So I love attachment theory. I think it is so important and something that I integrate a lot into my work with others because it shows up so frequently. And so Attached is a book that I feel really goes into how we develop our attachment styles and how do we move through when we don't have a secure attachment. How do we live with our anxious or avoidant attachment style and move towards a place of more security to help improve and maintain our relationships. Very, very excited to dive into this one. So the other two books that I got while I was in Atlanta have nothing to do with counseling. When I was there, I didn't have a lot of time for exploring, but I knew the one thing that I wanted to do while I was in Atlanta was visit the home of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so I went there. It was mid-COVID, so they weren't doing like tours of the house, but it was very cool to stand outside, and I did go into the gift shop and pick up a couple of his books because I have never read any of them. The first one I got is Stride Towards Freedom: The Montgomery Story, and this is a memoir from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that is all about the first large-scale successful nonviolent protest during the civil rights movement, so it feels like very standard. This is definitely one that I should read. And then I also got Why We Can't Wait, and on the back it says this is often applauded as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s most incisive and eloquent book. It details the Birmingham campaign, which at the time during the civil rights movement, Birmingham, Alabama was one of the most segregated cities in the United States, so it really talks about the efforts that they made for nonviolent protests and talking about action for future generations. So these felt like there were so many more books I wanted to get. I just felt like these two are the ones that spoke to me most as where to start with his works. The next book I got was, I think, the last book I got in 2022, and this was at a holiday party I went to at Monica and Reagan's apartment, and last year we did a candle exchange, like a white elephant candle exchange, and this year we did a candle exchange and a book exchange where you were meant to bring one of your favorite books, wrap it up, and write some details about it, and then we all went around picking one book and then stealing it from each other, and it was a really fun time. It was actually the last number to get to pick a book, and so I just chose the last book that was in the pile, and it was Monica's book, which is Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. And I know that this is one of Monica's all-time favorite books, and it's definitely a book that I would not pick up for myself, so this really motivates me to read something a little bit out of my comfort zone. All I really know about it is a generational story about 4 generations of a Korean family, and I feel like I just can't summarize it well, so I'm just gonna read this paragraph on the back. In the early 1900s, teenage Sunja, the adored daughter of a crippled fisherman, falls for a wealthy stranger at the seashore near her home in Korea. Clea. He promises her the world, but when she discovers she is pregnant and that her lover is married, she refuses to be bought. Instead, she accepts an offer for marriage from a gentle, sickly minister passing through on his way to Japan. But her decision to abandon her home and to reject her son's powerful father sets off a dramatic saga that will echo down through the generations. Definitely not a book that I would pick up for myself. I am very much not a historical fiction girly. I don't read a ton of like generational stories, again, just like not big on flashbacks and many timelines, but I know how much Monica loves this book and I've just heard nothing but good things about it since it came out, so it is one that I am more motivated to read now. Moving on to my last couple of books, I have the new hardcover collector's edition of Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I got this at the launch event for The First to Die at the End with Adam Silvera, and Casey McQuiston was moderating. I didn't get to get my book signed by them, but when I saw this gorgeous hardcover, I just could not resist. Oh, it is signed though. I didn't get it signed personally, but I did buy it signed. Y'all know about Red, White, and Royal Blue. It is the like booktube book of 2019 maybe is when it first came out, but it's a story that I absolutely loved, so I'm excited to have this like really nice edition. In 2022, I also got Breaking Time by Sasha Ellsberg. I got to go to Sasha's event that she had in New York City and see her for the first time in so many years since she moved to London, so it was really wonderful to see her. I know that she's been working on Breaking Time for so many years, and so I was really excited for her to like finally have this book finished and published into the world. She signed it to my favorite TikTok therapist, I heart you. Love her so much. So Breaking Time is a historical fiction set in Scotland time travel story. All of those things are very much not my thing, so I definitely can say with confidence I probably won't ever read Breaking Time, but I love supporting my friends. I love having their books for my friends who have published books, so I'm excited to have it, but you know, I think that if that does sound like your thing, maybe it's something to check out. Next up, I have Gideon Green in Black and White by Katie Henry. Y'all might recognize the name Katie Henry as I have been raving about her books since her very first release, Heretics Anonymous. She's definitely one of my favorite YA authors to start being published in the last maybe decade or so, and this is kind of like an offshoot, a little detour of the types of books that she normally writes. She was previously writing like a lot of contemporary, some books with mental health themes. Her books are just all really creative YA stories, but this one is more so a mystery, which I feel like I have hauled a lot of like YA mysteries, which I'm happy about. Gideon Green in Black and White follows another like teen childhood detective where he has retired at 16 years old because his friend, who was kind of like the Watson to his Sherlock, ended up cutting him off without explanation until she comes back years later and is stuck on a case that she's writing for her school paper and wants Gideon's help. This book definitely has a lot of film noir influence to my understanding, especially with the title. This is another one that I feel like I should really bump up on my TBR. It's just kind of been like sitting on my shelves. I've been looking at it for a couple of months. Like, I should probably read that, but I feel like since loving Nine Liars so much, maybe this is like the perfect time to really give it a shot. And I always love Katie Henry's books, especially her writing style, because she is just so naturally funny. So I'm super interested to see what she can do with this mystery. The next book on my list of books I got last year is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. Now, Lucy Foley seems to be a really popular psychological mystery thriller author, but I've never read anything from her before. When I was thinking about my most anticipated books for the year last year, this is one that was always talked about as like the top thriller to be excited for this year. So naturally, I picked it up, and this is another one that I did actually read last year. This is all about a woman who is like running away from her past, you know how it goes, but she goes to visit her like half brother who is living in Paris. So as our main character arrives to her brother's apartment, she discovers that he has disappeared without a trace, and part of the book is her trying to figure out what has happened to her brother, where he is he okay, but it also starts unveiling some sinister goings on that she wants to learn more about from the other tenants in his apartment building. This is a book that I kind of had mixed feelings on because it was super engaging. I think I read this book in like 2 days, which is unheard of for me in 2022. The characters were definitely very interesting. Like, I think there are a couple of different perspectives in this book, and all of the other tenants are just on like very different spectrums personality-wise, and there were a lot of really good twists in this book that I wasn't expecting that made it more entertaining, but it just didn't do it for me. It's one of those books where it just didn't blow my mind, and I can't really identify what it was about this book that like didn't make it good, because I felt like it was a well-written mystery novel. Maybe I just like hyped it up a lot and it just didn't live up to my hype. It was still good nonetheless. I'm glad that I read it. I would recommend it if you like thrillers. It just like, it wasn't super notable. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. It was good. It just wasn't necessarily anything special or groundbreaking. And the last book on my book haul of 2022 is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is also the UK version that I think I got from Waterstones, but honestly I just really did not like the American cover. It is just like so bland and sepia toned, and this one's so colorful. I love it. Carrie Soto is Back is the highly anticipated next release from Taylor Jenkins Reid, and it follows a like young prodigy tennis player. So it follows basically like her whole life. It starts from when she has started playing tennis to how she develops and becomes one of the greatest tennis players of all time, and after an injury she has to take a break from playing tennis but later comes back. So obviously with Carrie Soto is Back, it is all about how she eventually gets back into the game of tennis and is kind of grappling with her reputation as this really amazing but also vicious tennis player and trying to regain that. So I really liked Carrie Soto is Back. It's a good book. Like, I don't think I can find a Taylor Jenkins Reid book that she has published since The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because those are the only books I've read of her, but I feel like none of them I can say like this wasn't a good book at the least. It's definitely my least favorite of all of her other books though. I think one of the main reasons is that all of the other books have so many complex themes, they have many different perspectives, they have different timelines and characters, and this one is another one that, you know, takes place over the course of a character's life, but it feels very one note. Like, it is about a girl who plays tennis. There are other themes throughout this story, like it really talks about the relationship with her father, which is made more complex by the fact that he becomes her tennis coach. It talks about the misconceptions and misogyny that she faces as a female athlete, as being known as being super aggressive when she is just confident, and her struggles with romance and relationships. So it's not like there is nothing to this book. I just feel like compared to the other Taylor Jenkins Reid's books that I've read, it doesn't amount to that. It's a great book though. Like, nonetheless, despite the fact that it didn't blow me away the way some of her other books have, I still highly recommend it. It was a good read. It was interesting. It doesn't hit my soul the way Daisy Jones, Evelyn, and Malibu Rising have. Alrighty, so that is my book haul for all of the books that I have accumulated in 2022. It feels super nice to be back filming a video, and like I said, I have a couple of older ones that I have been working on. I really want to film my reads for 2022 because, again, not as many, so I can include them all in one video. In the comments below though, while we are waiting for me to get around to making my favorite reads of 2022, please let me know your favorite books that you have read in the last year, or maybe some of your least favorite, and when I get around to it, we'll see how we compare. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you soon for a new one. Bye!